Good afternoon, everyone. We're live. My name is Kristina Frolova, and I'm the president of the National Inbound and Domestic Tourism Association, and I welcome you to the second session of the fourth edition of ANTRIM Incoming and Domestic Travel Forum. Just a few technical ideas for those who are interested in Romanian. I'll just tell something for them. Bună ziua tuturor! Celor care doresc să primească, să audă traducerea în română, vă rog frumos să alegeți limba spaniolă din opțiunea de traduceri, pentru că nu există limba română și am fost nevoiți să alegem o altă denumire pentru traducerea noastră. Good, thank you everyone. We're starting the second day. As I told earlier, we had a fantastic first day of the forum. We got so many positive feedback from yesterday's presentations, and I want to tell you that today we have very good and outstanding panelists, so it is going to be another successful day. So again, we're talking about how the touristic industry in the world has to react to the conditions that we are now. The worldwide outbreak of COVID-19 has brought the world to a standstill, and tourism has been the worst affected industry of all major economic sectors. Against the backdrop of heightened uncertainty, up-to-date and reliable information is more important than ever, both for tourists and for us, the touristic sector. The second session is all about the know-how in the tourism industry development and its implementation in Moldova's tourism sector. What is there for tourism industry in the post-COVID era we're going to discuss today. But in the meantime, I want to thank all our strategic and development partners that for the last 7 years, they have been together with us. So with the help of our partners, we've managed to create one of the most important association in the country for inbound and domestic tourism. And thanks to them and to our great team, we're able to offer you this outstanding presentation later on. So I would like to thank the United States Agency for International Development, the USAID, as well as the Swedish government and the British government for their support to both the tourism industry and ANTRIM via the Moldovan Competitiveness Project. And we are very glad to have on board European Bank of Reconstruction and Development as forum's partner and hope for an extended collaboration for the upcoming period. So as I told earlier, the second session is about the know-how in the tourism industry development, and our panelists today are going to be Mr. Ibrahim Osta, Director of Middle East and North America at Chemonics International and former Chief of Party, Building Economic Sustainability Through Tourism Project in Jordan. Ibrahim will also moderate this panel together with me. Ibrahim Osta is an international tourism development expert based in Washington. Based in Washington, D.C. He served as chief of party of the 100 million USAID tourist development portfolio in Jordan, which helped grow the tourist sector several $1 billion. He has led, advised, and continues to support tourism development activities in various countries such as Nepal, Ukraine, Georgia, Timor-Leste, Egypt, Tunisia, United Arab Emirates, and Lebanon. Hello, Ibrahim, and happy to have you here with me. So I've started talking about our third panelist, Mr. Justin Reid, Director of Destination Marketing, Europe, Middle East, and Africa at TripAdvisor. The Director of Destination Marketing, Europe, Middle East, and Africa at TripAdvisor, where he works with destination marketing organizations to increase awareness, interest, and ultimately travel to the destination in the EMEA region. Previously, for 13 years, he was the head of digital and social media for Visit Britain, responsible for all aspects of digital and online marketing from the core websites, social media, search engine marketing, web content, campaigns, analytics, through the usability and the overall customer experience and eCRM. Very glad to have you here. Al Merchant, founder of Myriad Marketing, representing more tourist offices than any company in North America. As the founder of Myriad and a partner with MMGI Global, Al's efforts are hands-on and wide-ranging. More often than not, you can find him developing strategic solutions to client challenges, creating industry partnerships, and supporting Myriad and MMGI Global growth. Al is also an accomplished speaker, having presented on 5 continents and in countless countries on topics including research, marketing, changing trends, and the creative process. As you see, our presentations today are going to be also outstanding. Thank you very much to all dear speakers for agreeing to participate to the forum. And Ibrahim, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christina. Very generous introduction. I appreciate our partnership with you on this. I must say this is quite exciting for all of us, especially for me. I presented on tourism in over 20 destinations. It's the first time to be introduced by an owner of a castle. So I will mark this in my calendar as a special day. And that's perhaps part of the appeal of Moldova, that you have such rich and distinctive cultural assets, fabulous people, great nature. And I had the privilege of visiting Moldova a few years ago, traveled above ground as well as underground to the longest and deepest wine cellar in the world, a Guinness World Record. And one of the attractions of Moldova.
We have 2 actually that are world record, yes.
Fantastic. It was good to chat with your team at ANTRIM as well as with the USAID Moldova Competitiveness Project leading up to this day to understand where Moldova stands in terms of its tourism industry, in terms of the challenges of the new world, of the new normal, as some like to call it, the COVID and post-COVID emerging realities. And when I called the team that we have, the distinguished speakers who you introduced, I said we have this opportunity to share with Moldova. They very quickly jumped on the opportunity and kindly offered to share their insights. Now, I've worked with this team for about 10 years now, so all of them. So we're going to have a cohesive message for you. We've been planning together, both with yourselves, with the MCP project, and among ourselves to give you a glimpse of what is happening around the world. I'm going to share my slides. Just a quick comment that I think it's quite exciting to be with you, not just because I visited Moldova and I felt Moldova, but because of also what I heard yesterday from His Excellency, the Minister of Economy. He was unwavering in his support to the tourism sector. It was very clear that tourism is a strategic industry. I think he relayed the government message that tourism is important for not just employment and generating foreign exchange, but because it's an engine of growth for the rest of the economy. That you have so many other industries that are interlinked with tourism, that tourism can serve really as an engine of growth throughout. And it was great also to hear also USAID mission director affirming USAID support to the industry. We heard from him a bit on what the USAID Moldova Competitiveness Project is doing, and I'm here on behalf of the Moldova Competitiveness Project. And I know that the team leadership of the project will be speaking in a bit more detail tomorrow on this. But quickly, what are we doing today? Quickly, we'll be looking at some of the global trends that are affecting the industry very quickly. And we'll proceed to look at the economics of tourism, what is happening around the world, and how tourism can grow in light of a new world reality. What are the prospects for growth which markets may come back faster, and then what are the travel sentiments that are emerging. And I do want to stress on the word emerging, because we're not at a standstill situation, especially with COVID, while tourism has always been a fast-paced industry in terms of its development. It's a creative industry, it rests on innovation, as much as it is tradition and assets and antiquities and nature and otherwise. Fast moving, but we live in a much faster moving world today with many dynamics changing, particularly in the intersection of health and tourism with COVID, and then the interplay between the different new partners that we're seeing, where a Ministry of Health in an economy can determine the fate of tourism as much or maybe even more than a Ministry of Tourism. So Justin will build on the first introduction by Adam Sachs, who's looking at the economics of tourism, to look at travel sentiments and what visitor motivations are looking like into the future. And we're going to cap it off with a discussion with Al Merchant, who's going to tell us how we can take our message, how we can take the authenticity and the attractiveness of Moldova and present it to the world. And now, as a warning, in an hour and a half, maybe a bit more, we will not give you full solutions. This is a discussion, so we're going to share some thoughts, some of the best practices, some of the emerging practices, since we do live in an emerging world, some of the emerging practices that we can learn from. And please, as a result, engage in this discussion. You have the question button, share it with us, and we'll get to your questions as much as possible. Let's begin just with understanding what tourism is, remind ourselves. The CEO of the largest tourism company in the world, TUI, was asked recently, pre-COVID, it's $1 billion company, as many of you know, said, how do you keep succeeding in selling travel packages? And he says, we're not in the travel business, we're in the business of selling dreams. And really that's what it comes down to. It's selling dreams. How do we package this dream of a dream vacation? How do we engage in communicating the promise of a dream to the marketplace, and then delivering on it through experiences? When people come, make sure that they're happy, they're satisfied, and they willingly and happily spend their money and make friends and tell their friends about this experience, whether through social media on platforms such as TripAdvisor or face-to-face, to bring more visitors back to the country. So with this understanding of the kind of the emotional aspect of tourism, as much as it is the actual getting on a flight and coming to visit, that really drives our understanding of the solutions we need to bring for the tourism industry. And Moldova has all what it takes to really succeed in the international marketplace. As I mentioned, I experienced it firsthand. I was so excited when I was there. I was tweeting and posting on Facebook and Instagram the photos from the different places, and I was receiving messages from people around the world that, I want to come to Moldova, I want to visit. One of the calls I received was from an airline company, a low-cost carrier. They said, we opened our first route to Georgia. Do you think we can open Moldova? Of course, the answer is yes, and hopefully that will happen at some point. But you do have cultural assets. You have fantastic and hospitable people, quite interesting, but you also have really exquisite nature. And this is where the world is moving, or at least some of the market demand is moving. More nature, more outdoors, adventure. And adventure doesn't have to necessarily mean climbing mountains, but having distinguished and differentiated culinary experiences is soft adventure, as much as you have the hard adventure. So everything in between, in the outdoors, away from the mass packaged, clustered type of tourism. This is where the market is going, at least this is what we're seeing signals. And these are the assets that Moldova has. So we stand at the point where while Moldova, just like the rest of the world, have suffered as a result of COVID, you do have the chance to present Moldova as a really distinguished destination that can strategically position itself to capture a much larger segment of the market and a much higher level of the market, the higher spending visitors that would be willing to come and experience something new. And my discussions with many international outbound tour operators, the one word that keeps coming out of these operators is that the market is looking for a new or an exotic destination. They're looking for a new destination, or they're looking for sub-destinations within an established destination. So going out of the city as opposed to being in the traditional cities. Not all markets are going to be seeking this, but we're seeing a larger segment of the market quite interested in more differentiated experiences. And these experiences match the assets, the cultural assets and the natural assets that Moldova has. And very quickly, what is happening around the world, and it's no secret that international tourism came to a standstill. It was virtually wiped out for a number of months, starting in the spring, continuing into now. We have the halt in flights, borders closed, lockdowns. As we stand today, however, we're starting to see some easing. About 40% of destinations have eased travel restrictions, and the easing is not all uniform. So some destinations are more open than others. Some require a PCR test on arrival. Others require it before arrival with a quarantine in the source country before arriving. Others require quarantine after arrival. So different rules are impacting, therefore, the attractiveness of destinations and the willingness of visitors to elect these destinations and vacation in them. But we're starting to see also a major push and rise toward domestic tourism, and that's a good thing because first and foremost, really the residents of the place need to enjoy the place, and the more people know about their own location, about their own country, about what it has to offer, the more resilience we have in the sector. And at the same time, we see a growing pie for tourism, not just therefore from international visitors, but international as well as domestic. We also see the evening out of seasonality, peaks and troughs. But this has been forced on us. Domestic tourism, the growth of domestic tourism as a result of the border closures, but this could be an area for further investment into the future, especially to even out seasonality and help with the resilience of tourism. We're also seeing some flights coming back, some flight routes. Certain airlines are more courageous than others, or maybe they're more competitive. We're seeing some airlines are really making an investment. They're willing to take maybe a financial loss at this point to either be kind of the first to come back into the market, capture some market share. Emirates is one, Turkish Airlines is another one, and some of them are going out of their way to make even promises that if you visit with them, they will take care of even COVID-related medical expenses should somebody catch a virus, even post-arrival. So not even only while they're on the flight, but even a week or 2 or 3 weeks, as in the case of Emirates, after disembarkation. So we're starting to see more and more destinations reopening, and that's a great sign, of course. And we're seeing, of course, the bubbles. That's an interesting term that came out right now, whereby countries or destinations agree with select others that travel back and forth can take place either seamlessly or with lower restrictions, some restrictions, but lower restrictions than others. This is a photo of Dubrovnik, for example, and who would have thought that as soon as Croatia opens, people will start flocking into Dubrovnik? Or maybe that's an overstatement to say flocking. I checked last week, Dubrovnik occupancy rates in hotels was about 30%. But that might have been unheard of only a month ago, that demand will be as high as 30%. However, it's a travesty compared to the 90-some% that Dubrovnik attracted last year, same time. Nevertheless, 30% is a fantastic accomplishment for a destination when it was pretty much empty only weeks earlier. So we're starting to see some of those destinations, and the important part is that this gives us reassurance of what we've always thought about tourism, that tourism is a resilient industry. It's true that it takes a hit, but it comes back, and it has always come back, whether after a terrorist attack, after the SARS situation, the financial crisis, and when it comes back strong. Of course, I would still have to qualify what I say is that COVID is not like SARS. It's not like the financial crisis. So can we predict with confidence what the future holds? Probably not. But at least there are positive signs, and these positive signs are encouraging that there is a segment in the market, at least, that is intrepid enough, courageous enough, interested enough, that will come back. So that's on the cultural side, some nature, but also we're seeing really a major increase in the largest segment in the world, sun and sand. Turkey has opened its beaches, Egypt has opened its beaches, Spain has opened its beaches, and we're seeing arrivals to these destinations, and we're seeing also the flights starting to go to these destinations, to the beach destinations, because there is demand to them. So that is quite interesting. And just take an example, Spain, for example. Spain recognizes that really we've been starved out of foreign currency, and we really want to open. So they opened for British tourists. And that also reminds us that while the industry does come back and there is demand, it's still unclear in terms of the trends. Very quickly after Spain opened, the British government said, well, if you go to Spain, you're coming back, now you have to quarantine for 14 days. So if you're taking a 7-day vacation, you need to spend an extra 14 days at home now. When the destination opened, UK to Spain, this regulation was not in place. So things can change, and because things can change, a destination and us as people in the tourism business and tourism planners, we just need to remind ourselves that we do need to have plans in place to respond more quickly and with more agility than we did in the past. And we're starting to see, for example, hotels, tour operators put in place more liberal cancellation policies, no questions asked. Oftentimes, we're becoming more creative in offering rebooking incentives as opposed to cancellations overall. So this all can inform our thinking when we're moving forward, either as a destination or as businesses, how we need to manage a very fluid situation. Now, it's important that there is clarity as well as consistency that tourism planners as well as businesses to have in order to rebuild the market. Just one example, IATA, the International Air Travel Association, was pleading with prime ministers of the European Union for a more coherent policy among themselves for travel policy. And just a couple of days earlier, before that, did the same thing with Middle Eastern governments. If airlines do not know when they can travel, the rules for travel, how can you promote tourism without people coming? And how will they come if they can't fly? And that's an example of policy coherence that is needed, not just for the airline industry, but also between health authorities. Again, what type of quarantine, what type of testing policies need to be in place. And oftentimes we do see destinations that do a great job at containing the COVID situation, but there's an opportunity for them to do even the same good job or even a better job to engage with the marketplace, to engage with other governments, to explain to them the protocols they have in place, the success they have achieved in containing the virus in order to build confidence among the other governments to make sure that there are no surprises in terms of quarantine if somebody comes back, for example, from that destination and otherwise. And this boils down also trust. Trust is really key to recovery. It's always been important in any business that customers deal with brands that they trust. They travel to destinations that they trust. You trust you're going to have a great experience. You trust that you're going to be safe when you arrive. And trust is key. And major brands are right now using the theme of trust to rebuild the market and recapture market share. In the past, there was a move in the past. Sounds like a long time ago, just a few months ago, there was a trend over the past few years where we're seeing the market moving toward more authentic, more distinguished types of experiences, a bit away from the large hotels into more boutique hotels, farmhouses, guest houses, and so forth. But now, the market is looking at the large hotel chains thinking, well, maybe they can make the investment in health and sanitation and safety. They have their protocols, and they can ensure that if I book a hotel room, the hotel room is sanitized. It is up to standard. And that sort of confidence, that sort of investment is being made by hotels, not only to guarantee the safety of their customers, but also as a message to recapture the market share. Now, for destinations like Moldova, where you have more authentic, local type of experiences, accommodations, and it's not just unique to Moldova, but many other destinations that have done and will continue to try to position themselves for that space in the market. How can these independent operators ensure and present to the market that they are as safe as these large branded hotels? That is something for us to consider. And we need to consider this not just for accommodations, but also really for every touch point of the visitor journey. We need to look at the entire visitor journey and give confidence to the market that you get on a plane, whether you're in a taxi, you're in a guest house, or in a park, etc., that you're well taken care of, and that the destination and its businesses have taken all precautions necessary to make sure that you have a safe as well as an enjoyable experience. Now, the industry moved together very quickly to try to help reboost the market. This is from the World Travel and Trade Council. And the World Travel and Trade Council came out with a set of protocols from shopping to aviation to hotels and otherwise, whereby these guidelines, let's call them, are available for these businesses to inform their own development of more detailed standard operating procedures. I would say they are fantastic as a starting point. It is not enough to copy and paste them. You need to take them, you need to adapt them to your own situation, to the specifics of the country, as well as for the trade, as well as for the business. But they're a great starting point. Same thing with the Adventure Travel Trade Association. Also, they came out with fantastic guidelines. And I would say with the ATTA, they cater a bit more to destinations as well as businesses that are promoting more cultural, community-based, as well as nature and adventure visitor experiences. So you have guidelines for anything from rafting to culinary, home-based accommodations, farm stays, trekking, and otherwise. And all of these, whether for the World Trade and Travel Council or the Adventure Travel Trade Association. They're all available online. You can download them, and it's a great deal of learning from them. Interestingly, I would say the ATTA engaged the Cleveland Clinic, one of the world's best medical centers, as well as G Adventures, a leading adventure travel company, in the creation of these documents. They engaged the industry. So myself and many, I'm sure, of the panel and others received these in draft form, and the companies, the operators, were able to comment on these. So there's a great deal of confidence that if you have similar protocols, then the source market operator, that's going to be your partners in sending you business, are going to have more confidence in your ability to deliver an experience up to also their expectation. Because not only do we need to convince the visitor to come, we need to convince the outbound tour operator to send business to the inbound tour operator. I would say, of course, that standards are not enough. So we have standards, they need to be adopted. So they need to be adopted, A, by the government. And we do see, for example, the WTTC issuing the seal for safe travel for destinations. And they could be done, of course, for businesses. But it's also important to promote these standards through tourist boards, through associations, and otherwise, again, to ensure that we're capturing the trust and confidence in the market. But also by the industry itself, and not only develop and adopt standards, but they have to be adhered to really in practice. They have to be adhered to in practice. There was an appearance in a recent discussion with a large hotel chain. They mentioned that to them, equally important to ensuring that the hotel is sanitized, it's the theatrics that come with it. So they want to make sure that when the visitor comes, they actually see precautions being put in place, and the hotel is sanitized, and that these guidelines are being taken seriously. And again, I just can't underestimate the importance of communication. We need to communicate to the prospective traveler. Of course, ultimately, our goal is zero incidents in the country. We don't want any bad press coming saying a visitor or a company sent their visitors to country X and they contracted the virus. And that's why we need really kind of a comprehensive implementation of these guidelines. Some of them may need to be mandatory by the government in terms of food handling, for example, or otherwise, and many of them would be voluntary. Now, what's interesting is that as countries look at reboosting their tourism, there are a number of phases they go through. I looked at what Moldova has been doing in terms of maintaining low COVID incidence, and where you are right now. You're really toward the final phase. You're ready really to capture the market. And there's a formula that the Pacific Asia Trade Association came out with to assess where a destination is. So this is based on the analysis of where Moldova fits. Moldova's done a fairly good job managing the situation. It's right now at a position to go out and capture the market. So I would just highlight three of these issues, and you will have the slide so you can dig a bit deeper into this later on. But looking at international travel, policies and procedures and protocols, and businesses, viable businesses. Of course, we do need viable businesses to recapture the market. So if I begin with that, I would say there are a number of examples to share with you. No formula is possible to copy and paste from one country to another. Just to kind of instigate a discussion, I'll tell you what Montenegro has done, for example. They recognize that tourism to them is very strategic, it's very important, and they wanted to make sure that the businesses are actually going to remain in place post the crisis. So the government said, we're going to pay 100% of the minimum wage, at least just to keep some of the employees on the books. For the first couple of months, everybody thought at the beginning maybe COVID will go away, and it hasn't, unfortunately, but they're saying, okay, we'll pay 100% of minimum wage of employees, and it wasn't just for tourism, but across the board. But then when tourism businesses started opening up, they eased, for example, the opening restrictions for hotels, cafes, and restaurants. That, okay, since you're open, you only get 50% of the salary of the employees, but 100% for tour operators, because tour operators are stuck. They're really not generating any business. In Anchorage, in Alaska, they have a bed tax, and the businesses collect the bed tax from tourists. And the local government said, well, you got to keep the bed tax, so you don't have to give it to us. So as a form of injecting cash into the economy. Now, in the UK, the government is paying 80% of wages, and that's starting to decline. At the 80%, there's a split, 70%, 10% in September with the businesses, and it goes down to 60%, 60-20. And I understand that the UK government right now is still thinking about what will happen post-October. In Jordan, it's quite interesting. It's a different experience. Jordan, I would say Tunisia is similar to Jordan in terms of offering loan subsidies, but they're all tied to job retention, meaning if a business is going to apply for a subsidized loan, they have to have their staff remain in place. The one thing Jordan did differently also is they invested in domestic tourism campaign. So it was a subsidy. It wasn't just promotion, that the government actually underwrites part of the cost of a Jordanian or a foreigner living in Jordan going on vacation in Jordan. So part of the hotel is paid, part of the coach bus is paid, and so forth. Final look at a potential recipe for Moldova. Just again, it's not a plan, it's ideas to think about. Moldova is looked at differently from the mass destinations. You're small but beautiful. You have fantastic assets. And if we look at not being a mass destination as a weakness, it isn't. But let's assume that's one thing in terms of the number of arrivals. Really, you can convert that into a fantastic strength, because that is what the market is looking for something distinguished. And not only can Moldova come back to the market in a strong way, but move up market in terms of the kind of visitor that you're able to attract and a visitor that is willing to pay a premium price for the authentic, differentiated experience that you can offer. Yesterday, the minister spoke about policy reform, and that's an opportunity for the government to accelerate policy reform. And in one case, I would say development as well. Sometimes, not only do we need to fix a broken law or an outdated regulation we have, sometimes we just don't have one, and we need to bring in a new policy in place, so policy development. And we do need for any destination an all-of-government solution. It's different from before. In the past, tourism was Ministry of Economy, sometimes tourism, the financial sector, and otherwise. Now we're seeing that you need to bring in your partners. For example, we need a stronger partnership with the Food Control Agency, Food Administration, or whatever they're called. Different countries call them differently. But certainly, there's a new partnership between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Tourism that needs to be quite strong. You have a rapidly rising creative sector, and especially with the ICT sector, and we're seeing more dependence of the recovery on the ICT sector. For example, you have opportunities for virtual reality, touchless transactions, touchless experiences. So how can we introduce these touchless experiences in museums and maybe visitor centers and entering some sites, but also e-commerce and the cashless economy. You can introduce QR codes in restaurants so you don't have to touch the menu, as an example. Great opportunities, and this is a nice interplay between tourism as fueling also the ICT sector, and the ICT sector enabling and fast-tracking the recovery of the tourism sector. And finally, I will speak about cooperative marketing. In any destination, you have a number of tour operators that oftentimes compete. I would say in this case, it is not about competition, it's about cooperation. So we need to cooperate together as tour operators, together go out to the market, maybe tour operators, hotels, the attractions, offering a single solution and going out to outbound operators to grab the market in, but at the same time that you're able to negotiate potentially flights, maybe either charter flights, or you can have low-cost carriers. If you're able to generate the market together as a destination, not as a single company, say we're going to package our business and ensure that they're on a flight that could come maybe 2 or 3 times a week. That we need to think out of the box. How do we bring the airlines back if the flag carriers, the legacy carriers, as we call them, are more hesitant to come until COVID rests its case? So with this, I thank you for your time, and we'll move to a much more exciting speaker, Justin Reid. As Christina introduced, Justin has a long experience in destination promotion. We've worked with Justin in a number of countries, traveled together for a number of destinations, and his presentations are always insightful. And with this, I'll turn it over to you, Justin. What is the market doing, and how is it looking at Moldova, if you can tell us specifically?
Thank you, Ibrahim. Let me just share my screen now. So as kindly introduced by Ibrahim, I'm Justin Reid. I'm the Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa for TripAdvisor. Been there, I keep thinking to myself, I've been there about 2 or 3 years now, but I've actually been there nearly 6 years, having come from a long tourism background. What we're going to look at today is very quick insight and introduction to TripAdvisor. A very quick look at what's happening in the wider world, but we'll spend a little bit more time looking at how this impacts, spelled it Moldova, sorry, apologies, Moldova, and how it might give you some insights as to, you know, what currently at the minute is very popular within the country, who your competitors might be, and most importantly, like, you know, what's, you know, together, everyone on this call, what can we potentially do to make Moldova one of, like, you know, the up and coming must-see destinations of the coming 2, 3, 4 years. So a very quick thing about TripAdvisor. We're 20 years young, we like to say. We started in the year 2000. I'm not going to read all this stuff out, but essentially if the slides are passed on, you're able to see how we did different things. One thing that always makes me, staggers me, is when I started, which was in 2016, I think we were talking about 100 million reviews. So the company had been going for 16 years and we'd reached 100 million reviews. Within the next 2 years, that had become almost 1 billion or 500 million reviews. So again, keeps growing and growing and growing. Of course, COVID is affecting everyone within the travel industry, but TripAdvisor is still very much there as the leading player. We're in good company. If we look at TripAdvisor, which started in the year 2000, we're actually a little bit younger than Google, a bit younger than eBay, Amazon. We're a bit younger than that, but we're actually, sorry, we're older than those. Yeah, we're younger than those guys. But we're older than Facebook, we're older than Twitter, we're certainly older than the Snapchats and there's things like that of the rest of the world. And what we so often see with destination marketing is people want to be on the next platform and they want what's coming up new, what can I be the first to jump onto? What I would say, always say, is go where your audience is, you know, and the chances of the people who are looking, the adventurous travelers, the ones that are really interested in new cultures, the ones who are interested in the wine, you know, they're probably not going to be on TikTok. You know, they're going to be on the likes of TripAdvisor. Well, they're certainly going to be on TripAdvisor, but, you know, they're still going to be on those platforms that have been around for a number of years. We are the world's preferred travel guidance company. We're available in 28 languages in 190 countries across the globe. Not to say every place, but most places, if you have a hotel or an accommodation, or if you have an attraction, or if you have a restaurant, it will be on TripAdvisor. Nearly 11 million listings we have across 190 countries. And there's a good chance that if you own a restaurant, if you own an accommodation, or you own an attraction, you might not even know that you're on TripAdvisor, but people will be reviewing it and will be talking about what the probably more than likely the great experiences that they've had when staying, eating, or experiencing your attraction. One of the things that we always focus on with TripAdvisor is if you are really, really bad, or if you are really, really good, people will write reviews about you. If you're just like a, yeah, not very interesting, people normally don't often go to the trouble to write a review. But if you're doing something really bad, then people will write a review. And you know what that is? It's free customer research. So, you know, if you're a hotel and you're offering free Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi is terrible, people will be writing about it. If you have a couple of staff in your restaurant who are fantastic, who give great customer service, waiters or waitresses who really know the cuisine, really know the wines, give great recommendations, people will be giving good reviews about that sort of stuff. So again, the reviews are there. I hate to say whether you like it or not, but it is kind of whether you like it or not. People will very rarely book a place without reading a review. So make sure you can go on there and see what people are writing about. We're also the biggest travel platform. 491 million travelers every single month go to TripAdvisor. We're not as big as Google. We're not as big as Facebook. But we are the biggest single travel platform. If you are on Facebook, you might be doing anything. You might be liking your friends' pictures of a cat or something like that. But if you are on TripAdvisor, you're a traveler. You're looking for that next bit of inspiration. So again, we've got the biggest single travel community in the world. And TripAdvisor travelers alone directly spent $605 billion on travel globally last year. It's going to be less in 2020. It's going to be less for everyone. We're also the number one in trust. Ibrahim spoke earlier about how important it is for travelers to trust a brand, particularly an emerging brand like Moldova. You know, people will they've started to heard about Moldova, but they'll still want to know, you know, I want to hear the opinions of travelers who have already been there. Travelers have experienced it and are writing about what they liked about the place. Nearly 1 billion contributions now, so that's reviews and stuff like that. And in terms of what we do or what people do on the platform, it's this is very much a sort of a 101 marketing slide. But you know, 4 out of 5 providers who've had a prior positive experience will talk about it. 86% of people won't even book without reading reviews first. 57% of people book attractions while on vacation, and 70% of people are looking for social recommendations before booking. So whether people are at the planning stage, whether they've booked a holiday and they're looking to, like, you know, look at that wine tour or whatever before they go, whether they've reached the destination, they love the hotel, but they want to, you know, experience a day trip or something like that, or whether they're bragging about it or talking about it to their friends afterwards, or looking to provide the wisdom of the crowd to others, it's all happening on TripAdvisor. In terms of our travelers, it's a fairly 50-50 male-female balance. It's slightly more married than others. We index very highly. Adam will probably be talking about indexes later, but if you think of an index as being 100 is the norm. So we've got almost 200% more postgraduate degree educated people on TripAdvisor. And if we look at it in terms of like their high net worth, they're 235% more likely than the average traveler to have an income of £150,000 a year. So these are the type of people who'll be taking 2, 3, 4 vacations a year. The sort of people who will like to experience, you know, something different. Again, it all ties into what Moldova has the potential and the opportunity to offer. I'm not going to read all this stuff off, but again, 83% are interested in culture, other cultures and other countries. 82% like to explore the world around them. You know, this ties in directly to the key selling points that Moldova has the potential to offer. And data underpins everything we do. Whether that's site browsing data, whether that's the travel intent booking data, people put in the filters of what they're looking to do. It sounds a little bit Big Brother, but we know what people's intentions are almost before that they do. So where we've got people who, for the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, have been looking at vineyard tours of Italy or of Spain, people who are looking to travel somewhere different, people perhaps who are looking for something, you know, a bit more off the beaten track this year. We know all that data. so we can make sure that the great Moldova content will be appearing in front of the right sets of people. Let's be honest, if someone is an American, sorry Al, if someone's an American and we know they've never traveled outside America, there's a good chance they probably don't have a passport. There's no point in us trying to convince those people that, you know what, the first time you leave the country, Moldova is going to be the place you can go to. But those international travelers that are looking at doing destinations with a similar offering to Moldova, those are the ones we really want to make sure that you're getting your messages in front of. So quickly moving on now to the world today. This is our co-founder and CEO, Steve Kaufer. More or less at the start of the lockdown period, he said, you know, I'm not going to read it out, but basically, when people are ready to travel again, when people are ready to eat out again, when people are ready to start exploring the world again, TripAdvisor will be there to guide them to your door. You know, we are committed, fully committed to helping the wider travel industry throughout this very difficult period to make sure that, you know, everyone has the right around the world to travel and experience new countries, new cultures, new experiences. That is Steve's vision. We did some surveys with our audience at the start of the pandemic, and we've been repeating them every 2 weeks. So, you know, opinions have gone up and down. People have said weren't wanting to travel for like a long period of time. Then in certain European destinations, people are suddenly saying, no, I want to travel next week. I've been locked down for too long. I want to go out. I want to experience somewhere new. But probably the main stat, the overriding stat, is that first one. 97% of respondents said they would feel comfortable traveling domestically within 6 months after COVID-19. And 89% of people said they would feel comfortable traveling internationally within 6 months after COVID-19. There is, of course, the question of what after COVID-19 means, but for a lot of people, for the majority of our audience, that meant government restrictions on travel being lifted. So not necessarily the antidote, not necessarily, you know, the whole global economy being back together. People have a huge pent-up desire to travel, and when they do, they're going to be looking for these new experiences. Again, just some more stats there. Probably the last one there, 50% of people on TripAdvisor had spent up to 5 hours in the last week planning their next trip post-COVID. You know, this is a great time to get new adventures, new experiences, new destinations in front of them, so they can actually, you know, when they're spending their 5 hours researching, they can think, you know what, something completely new this year, something we've never done before. Now's the time to travel and experience that. So we're now going to move on to some of the key destination findings about Moldova itself. And what we've found is that domestic travel within Moldova is already above the levels that it was last year. So that's people coming on to Moldova, coming onto TripAdvisor from a Moldova IP address and looking at things to do in Moldova. So you're actually up year on year. In terms of how you're gaining ground against your other markets within the Balkan Peninsula, okay? So these are your near rivals in terms of geography. Well, Moldova has increased its share of voice by 11%, okay? So you're 11% up compared to your Balkan Peninsula rivals compared to this point last year. And also, international users they're actually looking at a shorter window of opportunity now. So not much shorter, but about 3 days shorter. So in other words, those people who are, from an international perspective, looking to travel to Moldova, they're saying, right, I want to do it within the next month. So again, you have to be ready with that seasonal messaging, with that welcoming messaging, with that safety messaging, so that people can really see, you know, what it is that, make sure that Moldova is the place they want to choose. So this sort of pins out where the domestic travel has been. It's just sort of showing what we were showing earlier, but in a more sort of a graphical sense. So within the Balkan Peninsula, last year, you were averaging 3.8% of all flight searches to the Balkan Peninsula. This year, you're now at 4.2%. So the relative increase has been 11% there. And again, the flight search window has come down 1 day shorter, so people are looking to travel in the thing. Now then, here's where we get interesting. So where it gets interesting. So these are the countries the international countries that are looking at Moldova and how it compares the first half of this year with the first half of last year. So what really stands out there, what's quite amazing is, believe it or not, United States is the biggest single country looking at Moldova this year. Now, actually, a lot of that is due to the fact that so much of the States is in lockdown. So much of it is in, people are they are looking for new stuff. But hanging firm there in second place is what I think is your biggest international market, which is Russia. And then we can see that the likes of Italy and the UK, Germany, they kind of chop and change around, and Romania and the Ukraine are, again, sort of swapping places. Anywhere that's outside your top 10, okay, probably the numbers are so small that you don't really want to be focusing on at the minute. The really things you really want to be focusing on, I would suggest, is the Russian market, the Italian market, the UK market, the Germany market, and then probably the Romanian market in terms of proximity. Those are the ones that will yield the biggest growth numbers in the coming time period. So in terms of what's happening, accommodations are gaining share amongst both domestic and international travelers. So again, that's up. Here we can see here, what we're looking at here is the increase year on year from domestic travelers. So again, it's been up and down. The top line, the orange one is restaurants. So interest in restaurants really peaked in January and February, tailed off a little bit when lockdown was really on, but it's increased again. And accommodation has seen a steady increase throughout the year in terms of that domestic visitor. In terms of the foreign international visitor, again, the biggest increase is in the attraction pages, then the restaurants pages. But even the accommodation pages, they are averaging up, over 20% year on year from that foreign travel. In terms of what they're interested in here, again, the most important thing, not surprisingly from all the research we've looked at and all the stuff that we've been talking about, it's food and drink that's really making Moldova stand out amongst the international travelers. Particularly, as we all know, that wine offering, the wine tours. People will travel for great wine experiences. Meanwhile, the least popular places amongst foreign visitors are things like the amusement parks, like bars and nightlife, like museums. Museums, we think, will gradually increase again, but that whole appetite for bars, clubs, nightlife, and amusement parks, it's down globally, and we don't see any sign of it, increasing anytime soon. A similar message as well for the domestic. It's the nature and outdoors and culture that's leading the way. So in summary, before I pass back to Ibrahim, there's no doubt that if we look at Moldova as a country already, even without sort of all the work that we're talking about doing now, all the things like this seminar, things like, the USAID involvement, Moldova is already significantly on the rise in terms of interest from both domestic and international users on TripAdvisor. Moldova is you're not outperforming, but you're beginning to take more of a share away from your competitors, from your neighbors and competitors in terms of that international share of voice. People are most interested in your experiences, okay? And an experience can be a wine tour, or it can be, an attraction or something like that. But that's really what's setting you apart at the minute. TripAdvisor has your audience. No matter what audience you're after, that audience will be on TripAdvisor. So again, what I said at the start, let's make sure we're all working together here, which is indeed the final point. Let's work together and let's really make sure that, we can make the next, 1, 2, 3 years, people will be talking about Moldova as like, from being the hidden destination to the exciting up and comer to like the place where people are really starting to visit in big numbers. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and pass it back to Ibrahim, I think.
There are 2 ways to mute my machine, and I did both of them. Thanks. I was thanking you for your data and statistics and research you've done for this. I'd like to invite the audience to think about what you said, especially the data. And if you have any questions, we'll pose them to Justin toward the end. I do say toward the end because oftentimes we have questions that are answered by a subsequent speaker. I'd like to invite Adam Sachs now to give us a global perspective on what is happening in world economies, particularly in tourism economies. And if you take your magic crystal ball, could you forecast what the future looks like? I know it's a risky business right now to make any forecast, but based on the information we have, some of the trends and your econometric models, what can you tell us, and what can the trade in Moldova as well as policymakers make with that information for policy and business decisions? Adam, turn over to you.
Well, it's good to be together, and yes, this is a difficult time to begin to forecast, but as a company, Tourism Economics, and our parent company, Oxford Economics, this is what we do year round and have been doing for decades. And but to be sure, this is a unique time and one of the most challenging times to understand where things are going. But the important thing is to be able to set this against what should we do? What should Moldova do within this context? How should it position itself? So I'm going to share some thoughts on that. I'll start by sharing my screen with you. I'm going to start by sharing some thoughts about the global economy. And it's important to realize that the global economy is, while it's not necessarily what we are thinking about right now, because the pandemic is the major factor affecting travel, it will be the global economy that is the primary driver of the outlook once we get into the second half of 2021. As context, what happened in the first and second quarter of 2020 has no historic comparison. We're looking at a contraction just in the third quarter of about 9%. Now, what's also interesting is that, well, while this was a much bigger downturn than, say, during the great financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, the rebound that we expect in the third quarter and the fourth quarter for global GDP will far exceed what we saw on the backside of the great financial crisis. So it's worse now. We believe that it will be better on the other side. And so as we move toward the second half of this year and into 2021, Oxford Economics expects world GDP to accelerate. You can see here how much lower GDP is compared to our forecast from January. This is a very different outlook. And it's different for two main reasons. One is that even after we pass through the recovery period, which really takes us through roughly the first half of 2021, we're below the trend where we would have been. That is, GDP does not get back up to its pre-crisis levels, at least what we had predicted previously. So that's the first thing. It's not gonna catch up to what it would have been. The second main point is that there is still an incredible amount of risk associated with the economic outlook. And that risk is shown with the gray shaded area on this chart. There is, of course, downside risk, right? With second waves, renewed lockdowns, a financial crisis, all real possibilities. We assign that a 40% possibility. But there's an upside risk too. And I think that this is something that is, certainly hopeful, which would have to do with medical advancements and further fiscal support from governments that would cause the global economy to recover more quickly and actually by around 2023, get back up to its pre-virus trend. So one of the ways to deal with the reality of the uncertainty is to conduct scenarios. And that's what we're showing you here for the world economy. Now, in terms of jobs, unemployment rates have risen around the world. I'm showing you Q1, the second quarter forecast, and then the third quarter forecast for major economies around the world. And you see the increase in the second quarter. For example, take Eurozone, just focus on that. We went from about 7% unemployment to the second quarter is going to be closer to 9% unemployment. A lot of the reason it hasn't been as bad as you might think is because of government support for those jobs. We expect unemployment rate to continue to rise around the world, especially in the Eurozone in the third quarter. But because of government support, that damage is more limited than it would have been. We're already seeing the global economy begin to rebound. So here I'm looking at retail sales, shopping, and consumer spending, and also looking at globally for advanced economies. These would be Europe, the US, Japan. We're seeing consumer confidence begin to show a little bit of life. So it's bottomed out, and retail sales have begun to rebound quite briskly over the last 2 months. In Eurozone, just to focus a little bit closer to home, we see the same dynamic, retail sales picking up after a very, very sharp drop in the spring. And the Purchasing Managers Index, which is really a perspective on how companies are buying goods and services as factors of production in their operations. You can see that for the Eurozone and for key countries, companies are beginning to behave normally. Right? They're coming back and beginning to purchase goods and services for production almost to the levels they were in late 2019. Now, one of the reasons that we need to be conservative in the way that we think about the economy coming back is that everyone is getting very cautious with the way that they're spending. So whether you look at households or corporations, both are saving more money. And you can see in the advanced economies around the world, that savings rate, say for corporations, went from about 1% to 6% very, very quickly. So corporations are hoarding cash. They're keeping that money because they don't know what the future holds. And households are doing the same thing, and that's affecting their travel decisions just as much as the pandemic is. And so that elevated savings rate is going to limit the rate of the recovery as we move into next year. Now, what does this all mean for travel? Tourism economics tracks travel for 185 countries and 300 cities around the world. So we keep this in databases, which we provide to our clients directly. In those databases are 10-year forecasts. I'm not going to share with you 10-year forecasts for the world, for major regions, and also some near-term forecasts for Moldova, and put some perspective on that. What do we think is the most likely outcome that's going to guide the travel outlook? Well, here are our key assumptions for the forecast. The first is that the coronavirus remains a defining factor through the first quarter of 2021 and perhaps through the second quarter. And that's going to be a function of progress in treatment as well as a vaccine that is hopefully going to be available in early 2021. But we recognize that's going to take time to be distributed and accessed by global population. But once we move past 2021, the first quarter, the second quarter, into the second half of the year, we do believe travel is going to begin to look a lot more like normal. Second set of assumptions is the policy response. There has been, as Ibrahim noted, an easing of lockdown measures through the summer. There will be some renewed lockdowns. I think that's inevitable. And international borders will be slow to reopen, but short-haul travel, that is within regions, is where we're seeing recovery already, and that's going to lead the recovery in international travel as well. So Justin, when he was saying, these are the markets you need to be focusing on, I could not agree more. And I would add to that over the next 9 months, the markets that are going to be most fertile, the ones that are going to come back most quickly, are going to be regional markets, right, within Central and Eastern Europe and some of Western Europe. On the economy, the global economy is, as I mentioned, in recession. We're expecting a 5% drop in GDP this year, but the economy is going to come back quickly due to government stimulus and pent-up demand, but the world economy is going to remain below its pre-crisis level. So these are the key assumptions to keep in mind as I share with you the outlook for travel. Our current model is predicting that global international travel is going to fall 57%, or put it this way, there's going to be 847 million fewer international visitor arrivals this year than there were in 2019. It's going to take until 2024 for that to fully recover. I agree wholeheartedly with Ibrahim that international travel will fully recover. And that we believe is inevitable. However, due to the economic damage, and when we look at other economic crises, and this has the additional effect of the pandemic, we're expecting global travel to fully recover to prior levels in 2024. Domestic travel absolutely is going to come back faster. We believe globally it's going to come back to prior levels in 2022. And of course, the risks here are primarily related to the virus itself and the second wave. There's a snapshot of our global travel forecast showing you our forecast back in February, and then what our forecast is now, the dark blue line. The shaded line, again, represents the uncertainty. And that uncertainty, we think, is most significant next year. If you look at the difference between the dark blue line and the gray shaded line bar, you see that there is significant downside risk in 2021 that we recognize. That one of the key things here is that we do see, and this is different than the economy, is that travel gets very close to our pre-virus forecast by 2025. So travel pent-up demand will be a reality as we move into the next few years, and we'll see a very, very strong recovery. There's nowhere to hide if you are in the tourism industry right now. No matter what region of the world we're looking at major declines. The largest declines in international travel among major destinations are in North America, particularly the US, where we expect a nearly 70% fall in international travel this year. Europe, closer to 50%. A lot of that is because of intra-regional travel that is picking up in the second half of this year. But as I mentioned, domestic is coming back quicker, and this is a dynamic we're seeing around the world. I think Justin alluded to this, seeing it in the TripAdvisor data. We're certainly seeing it in our travel data sets. And the key thing is, if you look at those lines that drop down from domestic travel, you get a full recovery in domestic travel in 2022, whereas international takes really until about 2023, 2024 before we're fully back to pre-virus peaks. So let's focus in a little bit on Moldova. This is our current forecast for Moldova, very consistent with the international outlook. I would say, though, that you can see that in 2023, this is just the percent change relative to 2019 levels. That in 2023, we see Moldova getting back up to where it was. And in fact, 2022 is only off about 12% from the prior 2019 level, which means that you can begin to prepare as an industry for something that looks a lot like business as usual as you move into 2022. That's very close to what we're seeing for the region. No big difference here. Both the broader region of Eastern Europe and Moldova about fully recovered in 2023. But one of the key things we're seeing here is when we look at where visitors come from to Moldova, you can see that long-haul visitors are where we're seeing the greatest declines in 2020. So that's the light blue bar, long-haul travel falling the furthest. and it's the slowest to return. So medium haul, that is broader region, and then short haul, those would be markets within close proximity of Moldova. Those markets are clearly not only more stable, but they're coming back more quickly. You'll see that as we compare Moldova, Romania, and Ukraine, for all three destinations, our models are predicting a strong rebound in 2021 and strong growth in 2022 as the market continues to recover. So the outlook on the other side of the pandemic, we believe is very good. The visitor market prospects are very good. What is going on in demographics and in incomes as we forecast the economy will support a travel recovery in 2021 and 2022. An interesting way to look at exposure is, where are visitors coming from? How many visitors are coming from short haul markets, medium haul markets, and the long haul? Again, long haul would be, say, from Asia, the Americas, Middle East. Mid haul would be from Western Europe, and short haul would be from within Eastern Europe. Moldova has 2/3 of its visitors, 67%, from short haul markets. Much better than Romania, which only has 27%, but not as good as Ukraine, of course, where almost all of the visitors are coming from Russia. Nevertheless, by comparison, you can see that Moldova is well positioned to be resilient because so many of your visitors are coming from short haul markets within the immediate region. Those are likely to come back more quickly. The domestic market is also very important in Moldova, and because of the importance of the domestic market in the recovery, that's going to indeed be part of your story as you experience recovery over the next 18 months. In Moldova, total nights spent, 79% are domestic travelers. That compares to 82% in Romania and 86% in the Ukraine. But you'll also notice that the drop in domestic guest nights is only about 35%, compared to, as I mentioned, over 50% for international. So the domestic market is has not fallen as much, and it's going to recover more quickly. And so it represents a significant opportunity along with those short haul regional travelers. So we do build an index. Thank you, Justin, for suggesting that I might share an index. Indeed, I am. And what I've done here is created a short haul resilience index. And what that is a measure of what share of your visitors are coming from short haul markets compared to all of your markets. And then I index that across countries to show what countries are in a better position to recover because of their greater exposure to short haul markets. And I've put Moldova here against major destinations around the world. I could see that Moldova is in the top third of destinations because such a large share of your visitors are coming from within the region. And so that's a good position to be in. It's a much better position to be in than say Thailand or Australia, where long haul visits are the vast majority of where visitors are coming from. And then the last slide that I have for you is what we call our travel potential index. And there are three components to this index. The first is the importance of domestic travel. The second is the reliance on short haul regional travel. And then the third is the potential that you have for domestic growth potential. That potential in domestic is a function of outbound travel, as well as the function of the size of your population and the income of that population. What we're seeing right now is that Moldova is the top scorer across all of these major destinations. And it's a top scorer for two main reasons. One is because of the short haul market exposure. And the second is because of the significant outbound travel of Moldovan residents and the significant size of that market of Moldovan travel that can be fostered, that can be developed and converted into domestic travel. And so those two things, regional travel and domestic travel, are going to be what sustains the industry through this difficult time. And then that long haul market is going to be all the more valuable as you move into 2022. So thank you very much, and happy to stay with you from here. Ibrahim?
As always, quite insightful, and you can't plan without data and statistics, neither for policy nor for marketing. And between what you told us and what Justin told us and the research that Al has been doing, in the introduction we spoke about MMGY being a global company involved in branding and marketing. But one of their arms is really a leading also tourism research operation that probably has some of the best tourism research in the world out there. So Al comes armed with insights from research, from their global network of tour operators and representation offices, as well as his vast knowledge helping countries present themselves to the world. And the challenge that Al took upon himself is to think about how can Moldova present itself in a way that not only brings markets back. I think the research and the models we looked at looks at how can we bring market in terms of numbers. I think the challenge that we've been discussing is not only how we can bring numbers back, but how can we bring or move up market? How can we bring better spending markets in so that the recovery can happen quicker in dollar terms, not necessarily only in numbers of arrivals. With this, I'd like to turn over to Al to speak to us about how Moldova can capitalize on all its assets to present itself.
Great, thanks Ibrahim, appreciate the opportunity. I too will start my screen share. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. We have a lot of slides to do, and at the risk of being a fast-talking American salesperson, we'll jump right into the presentation. Well, let's start off with what the presentation will not do. Unfortunately, we won't give you every answer that you want from a marketing perspective. I will promise you that I won't sell you anything today. And unfortunately, I won't make you the ultimate marketing guru. And I'm very sorry, but I can't tell you when COVID-19 will finally end, although we all wish we could. What the presentation will do is present some short-term and some long-term thinking, because it is two different thoughts that we have to go into that process. We'll offer you some branding insights and a couple examples of things that we think have worked well. And hopefully by the end of the presentation, we'll challenge some of your creativity, not only talking about destination branding for your own companies, and even branding for yourselves. Just by way of background, as Ibrahim mentioned, I'm with MMGY Global. I'm one of the partners there, and we are a company dedicated 100% to travel and tourism. So every morning we have hundreds of people trying to inspire people to go to places around the world. Our clients are varied from tourist offices, tour operators, airlines, hotel groups, et cetera, et cetera. So we take that expertise and apply it to all our clients. We also have offices throughout the United States, but are branching out into Europe and the Middle East. And we have a variety of different companies depending on the needs of the specific clients. I also happen to be honored to be chairman of Travel Council, which is a unique group of 18 travel marketing companies around the world. So we bring a unique perspective of having the inside local expertise with the global acumen that can help everyone. So collectively, we have over 500 clients, 55 offices around the world with over 800 marketing experts. And a lot of that experience we can glean to these presentations, especially with some of our clients, specifically tourist offices from around the world in varying degrees of their acumen. So let's talk about destination branding. Now, the reality is, as Adam and Ibrahim have alluded to, things are changing. So we're actually going to divide this into two presentations, a short-term one and a long-term one. So the short-term is some quick ideas for what we can do during this really challenging time of COVID-19 and how it's impacting the world. Of course, we all want the crystal ball of what will be the future, and I wish I could answer it like everybody. I will say this more than anything. We'd love to get rid of the word recovery. Everyone wants to benchmark what was, and the reality is there won't be a recovery to where it was once before. And it's important for us to think not what was it, but what could it be? How do we devise something different? How do we create something different? You know, Charles Darwin was famous for his theory of evolution. And most people think it was survival of the fittest. But it was very different. His solution to evolution was those who adapt to change are those who are the ones who survive and prosper. And I challenge everyone to think of it in those terms. How do I change my business for the future? Not how do I get back to what it was? It won't be that way. Now, when it comes to travel and tourism, how's it going to come back? Everybody wants to know. Of course, the reality is there's a lockdown and there's certain government policies that we have to deal with. After we get through the lockdown, what will happen in travel tourism? First, travel will come back. People will have to get used to being on planes and traveling. Once they get that from visiting friends and relatives and some business acumen, et cetera, then we will see tourism. That will be the second step. So it is that one-step program. We are starting to see travel pick up, so hopefully tourism is around the corner. I think it's also important to remember when people say, how many people will start flying to our destination? For the airlines to operate, they need people going both ways. They can't just go bringing people in without out. So as much as we need guests coming in, we also need to be traveling out to make it economically viable for the airlines. So what should destinations do? And what should destinations do and the hotels and all the stakeholders in them? The first thing we realize is we need a visualization. We need those optics to have that consumer feel more comfortable. There's a lot of international safety standards. It's up to you to pick if it's WTTC, if it's certain hospitals, if it's certain international organizations, what's going to be best for your market based on not what you think is best, but what your audience wants to believe. We do know there's optics, and this has been historic. Every time there's been a problem, we usually rely on something visual to help the consumer get it. Way back, we wanted safety. We looked around the toilet seats to see those little pieces of paper that gave us some comfort level. After 9/11, we went to metal detectors because we needed to say, okay, I feel safe. Now it might be temperature checks and other things that we see. So as operators, we need to think, what are the optics to have my person come and feel more comfortable? We also take a look at pricing. And one of the things we've seen historically is people seem to want to discount to get people in. So for an example, you might be a hotel and you did $200 a night. And your instinct is, let's slash the price to $69 a night. And it's possibly the worst thing you can do because it takes forever to bring those prices back up. Instead, we want to extend the length of stay and get more value for the consumer. Keep your price at $200, but offer 5 nights for the price of 2. Sounds extreme, but the reality is, if you do the $69, the 5 nights nets you about $345. Those 2 nights of pay, even though the person stays for 5 nights, yields more money and is better for the destination. We'd also say add some activities because the activities now and the hotels are interdependent on each other. Without the activities, the hotel stays will get shorter and shorter. So a room is not enough anymore, and the hotels can take a look. It was mentioned before about cooperation with your competitors. We're all in the same boat right now. So look at the festivals, the wineries, the museums. Who can you partner with to add value for your property? This is the new definition of community and what everybody offers. If it's the operator, hopefully add the hotel. If it's the hotel, add the bit of community. This is really what will be the new sharing economy for the future. and the best way for us to move forward together. The other important part is to be flexible. You see the increase of hotel bookings, you see the increase of airline bookings, because now you can cancel, you can change, you can adjust. Some of the US tour operators are saying, if you cancel this year and book for next year, we'll give you a 10% bonus. We'll give you $500 in a travel wallet. We'll come up with some creative ideas and be flexible about what we can offer, because we know these are testing times. Then, of course, the question is, how should I talk to my clients? What do I say to them now? Well, most importantly, remember your past clients. It costs 6 times more money to get a new client than to keep an existing one. I'm going to say that one more time. It costs 6 times more money to get a new client than to keep an existing one. So look back to your past travelers. They'll be the first ones who come back to a destination because they have a comfort level. They're not going to be necessarily trying new, but they will try the places that they know or people have told them about. And the most important thing is to stay in touch. You don't have to campaign, but you can communicate with them. And that's both on a B2B level and a B2C level. Keep in touch with them. The easiest way to do this is to stay social. Why does social media work? Because you're staying social, not so much the media part. There's 3 simple ways to do this. One is to use social media. It is probably one of the most cost-effective ways to do things. It allows you to tell the stories. And this is the important part. Don't sell. Tell the stories of what's happening in Moldova now. What are you doing? What are some of the optics that you are creating? What are some of the health measures that are happening? What's the personal story? What are you doing during these times? And that connects you. And social media is one of the best avenues to utilize to achieve this. Use your database. I can't tell you how many times we've all stayed at hotels. We write down all our information. We give you our email address. We give you everything, and we don't hear from you. We'd love to. We got a vacation in your country. We'd love to hear from you and reminisce about those times. So take advantage of that. The big question is, when will the visitors return? Adam said a few things. Justin said a few things. It is a crystal ball. We think after the lockdowns are lifted, we'll start to see some movement. Now, 2020, I don't want to say it's eliminated. We still have a few months, but for revenue, it will be a little harder, especially on the international side of business. We do believe 21 will start coming up. Excuse me, I've got those a little backwards, but 2022 should be a banner year. And there was references to the difference between international travelers and domestic travelers. One thing to keep in mind, and the parallels, the airlines. The airlines own less than 20% of their seats are business class and first class, but it's 50% of the revenue. Often when it comes to international travelers, they might only be 20% of the visitors, but quite often they represent 40 to 50% of revenue. So it still is an important market. One of our good presidents was Abraham Lincoln, and one of my favorite quotes is, he said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." So now let's move on to some destinational branding. And what we want to say is, remember, this is not just for destinations, it's also for hotels, it's also for tour operators, and it's also for you too. So what makes your destination unique? That's the big question. And the problem, the challenge is, if no 2 destinations are alike, I have to admit it, why do they all start looking the same? And just some ads to give you the idea, how many times have you seen ads that look like this? It's almost like I've become more romantic on vacation than I ever was at home. And yet I can't distinguish where any of these destinations really lie. They all seem to be going to the same idea, but you start seeing that people are talking about experiences more than things. This is one of my favorites. For some reason, when people hit the beach, they have to touch the water. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, somehow somebody has to walk out just far enough to talk and touch the water. It might be during the day, it might be during the evening, it might be just to find out if the water's still there. So it is important to reflect and say, who are we? Now, a lot of destinations will come up and try to label themselves very quickly. Who are we? Well, we have the friendliest people. Well, now that's kind of shifting it. We have so much diversity. We have the best shopping. Now people are saying, well, mate, we have locally curated boutiques. We've got the best restaurants. Everybody loves our food. Well, now we have award-winning, chef-driven, food-forward eating experiences. Think about what you're saying and what makes you unique, not quality, but what makes you different. Now we have a lot of craft breweries. We have something for everyone. And as soon as you say that, that's the worst, because it means you have nothing for individuals. You're trying to be everything for everyone. Be true to yourself. So then people shift to experiences. And that sounds good, but everybody's saying experience the energy. We have unforgettable experiences. We need more about what you're doing and what makes you different. And then that word that everybody wants to use, authentic. My favorite is the headline, how to be authentic. If you have to learn how to be authentic, you're in trouble. The trick is not to be authentic, but to be who you are. I'll give you the best destination in the world, the most authentic in my mind, and that's Disneyland. Now you might laugh and say, wait, Disneyland authentic? Yes, because what they promise is exactly what they deliver. They say it's a fantasy land, they say it's a lot of fun. That experience is carried through and delivered. And I would submit to you, that's being authentic. What you promise and what you deliver is true. Now the trick is to define your destination. And that's with facts and feelings and trying to find that balance between the two. One of the most interesting statistics we got by the end of the year, and admittedly this is US, is 6 out of 10 people agreed that the destination they visit says a lot about who they are, which means destinations are not places, they're personalities. And I want you to keep that in mind, because that personality, what is the personality of your destination or your company? Now, around the world, people have tried to put words into this. And this is a great little graphic of some of the places in the world and what they've said. Now, I've pulled out a few just to take a look. Algeria, tourism for everybody. Doesn't work, because that doesn't mean anything. Germany, simply inspiring. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. There's an inspiration with what they do and how they create. Turkey, be our guest. A little more about hospitality and talking about their personality. One of my favorites is Mongolia, go nomadic. They've been very clear of who they are and what kind of experience you'll get. And it's an interesting one. It's the one that talks about you and what you'll experience there with them. It's very clear. And of course, my all-time favorite is Slovakia. I can't help myself. Travel in Slovakia, good idea. Not necessarily the clearest, but it is simple. So who does this well? We're going to take a look at a few places that have really done an interesting job of branding, of positioning themselves at different times. This is actually from a number of years ago after the end of apartheid and what South Africa did. And with any luck, the video will work for us today.
Is it possible that miracles have a physical address? Is there really such a place?
As you can see, very much about the destination from the visitor's viewpoint, but really the emotive part of what makes South Africa unique and showing that they were in a transition, making what was thought to be impossible, possible. This is a new brand from Tokyo that takes a little bit from the old and the new. And it's interesting that they talk about old and new, but they're actually talking about classic and contemporary, and showing the respect for what the old is and how what was old and traditional is carried on in a new modern way. Very exciting. And this is one of my favorites because it's possibly the lowest cost with the biggest result, and it's the Faroe Islands. And this one really exemplifies, it illustrates their personality of the destination and how they're holding true to it. If you haven't heard about it, they created Sheep View. They put cameras on sheep and put that up because they couldn't get Google to come and do Google Street View. So here's a little video that they've done.
Welcome to Sheep View 360. Look, Google is coming. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Until recently, the Faroe Islands had no Street View. But now I've been making Google Street View by putting 360 cameras on the back of sheep and created Google Sheep View. But I had a problem. My sheep walk freely instead of following the roads. So I also needed Google. We have agreed with Google to make Street View together. They have supplied us with cameras, a Google tracker, and training. We have come to like our very own holy version of Street View so much that we want to continue with Sheep View, and with the help from Google, we have expanded the fleet with Rebecca on her horse, Ingmar on his skateboard, Gurun and her bike, Lisbeth in a kayak, and even Trenter has helped with his wheelbarrow. So if you want to help us continue the project, you can come to the Faroe Islands, borrow a camera, and help us make
Google
Sheep View.
Street View.
Sheep View.
Very creative and very true to their brand. It is that question of what's your unique selling proposition or unique selling personality, and defining your brand. What's the best exercise to do that? It's actually quite simple in a way on the analysis. The hard part is coming to conclusions about who's your personality. You can have your personality, but different parts of your personality. So try this as an example. If you were a watch, what watch would you be? What is the brand? Not enough to say I'm a luxury watch. There's a big difference between Versace and Blueberry, whatever it happens to be. So there's a whole lot of different opportunities there. If you were a car, what car would you be? What's the official car of your destination, of your region, of your company? And is everything you do in line with that car? It's really defining your personality. The ultimate might be if you were a celebrity, if Moldova had the opportunity to have a global celebrity as a spokesperson, who would that be? That helps define you, and it helps define everything in the product. When you do this analysis, look at the stakeholders. Who are the people delivering the product? It's not enough to say who we are. We want to make sure that the delivery upon arrival is true to what that claim happens to be. And because of that, you have to define your audience too. And it's one thing to say, here's the people we want. The more important part is, can we find that target audience? Is it easily definable? Is it easily reachable? And will they react the way we think they'll react, especially in a very competitive market? And most importantly, you have to understand their language. We were always taught, express yourself the best way we know how. The reality is we need to express ourselves the best way we need to be heard. And those are the watchwords of doing it. We talked about a unique selling proposition. The first step is there. The second step, especially now, is more importantly. A lot of places can say, why here? And you can answer the questions if it's architecture, if it's wildlife, if it's history. I could say, why here? Why this place? The natural beauty. Why here? That's the first step that you have to define. But now more than ever, why here is not enough. The big question is, why now? Why do I come to this destination now, more importantly than any other time? I need to come in 2020 or 2021. That unique selling proposition is the first step. but now we need a timely selling proposition. I need to come to your destination, but I need to make it urgent. I need to come now. So remember, it's a very competitive market out there. You have to say why we're going to come to the destination and why now. The most important thing I can leave you with today is the old idea of be yourself. Everyone else is already taken. Be true to yourself. And thank you so much.
Al, thank you very much for this. It's quite insightful and inspiring, in fact. I'd like to invite the audience, if you have any questions, we have about 10 minutes to go. But between now and the time I receive any questions, I would like to ask Adam. Adam, any particular countries that you've seen that have successfully accelerated their growth or their return, their recovery from others? Are there any policy prescriptions we could learn from?
Well, yes. You know, we're actually seeing. I mean, and it's interesting to, you know, I'll tell you the destination, then I'll tell you why it's interesting. China has actually begun to recover quite quickly, and of course it's interesting because that's where coronavirus was first, really first began to take hold, and I think it gives us some hope, you know, that once we do get the virus under control, whether it be through mitigation or through a vaccine, that travel is going to come back. We also see different destinations in Europe that are setting up what the travel bubbles or travel corridors, where it's reciprocal travel is showing signs of early returns, and domestic travel in different markets is also really filling in. So one of the reasons that the U.S. travel industry is not doing well but surviving is because U.S. households are traveling domestically. Now they're doing it differently. They're not flying, they're driving. And they're not traveling to cities, they're traveling to beaches and to the mountains. But those destinations that offer social distancing are the ones that are actually doing well. So we have about 200 destination clients around the world, and I could put them on a grid. And basically the ones that have a strong exposure to domestic markets and the ones that have outdoor experiences are doing relatively well. The ones that are highly exposed to international markets, to conventions and trade shows, and are urban are the ones that are doing very, very bad. And you can put any destination on that grid, and I could almost predict how they're doing right now based on kind of the exposure to domestic versus international, to group, conventions versus leisure, and then outdoor versus urban.
Interesting. Thank you, Adam. Justin, given the time it would take for the market to come back, is it too early to advertise a destination?
Never too early to advertise. And the reason I say that is because
That's a surprising answer. But while you answer this, I want to also ask you, should we be using imagery of sanitation and face masks and that sort of thing? So take it away.
Tricky one, I know, and I'll always be interested to hear Al's opinion on this one as well, and of course Adam's. But I would say it's never too early, because with a destination like Moldova, you're not talking about the inverted commas low hanging fruit of people who are I'm thinking of Moldova next week, or we really are talking about people who might be planning for next summer. There's going to be a lot of people now who will be prepared to spend a lot more time researching. They're going to travel quickly, but they might be probably traveling quickly to those places that as Adam said, the air corridors have opened up. So the air corridor opened up between the UK and Spain. Okay, it closed again a week later, but it opened up. Guess what happened? Brits descended on Spain like it was 2019. With somewhere like Moldova, we're going to have to spend a bit more time enticing the customer, enticing the client to sort of come. TripAdvisor is great for that, plug. But TripAdvisor is great for that because we can directly compare the reviews of people who've been to Moldova and the reviews of people who've been to Italy, the reviews of people who've been to you know, the wine areas of Greece or something like that, and we can like say, like, you know, this amount of people, they give it a higher review, the cultural experience of Moldova. Now then, where I'd say the jury's out is on this idea of people in face masks. First of all, there's been nothing like COVID ever, okay? There you go. There's a revelation that none of us knew. No, there's been nothing like COVID ever, but like all rules are out the window. So normally, if there'd been like a terrorist event or a security risk kind of thing, we would always recommend don't go out there and say, hey, we're free of tourism, you know, or we're free of terrorism, because all people are going to go, what, were you not free of terrorism before? So there's always a thing to say, lead with your best aspects. Now, having said that, with COVID being so different, we are now, TripAdvisor, introducing into our imagery, you know, just subtle images of people wearing face masks, subtle images of like, you know, people being tidier and cleaner and stuff like that. So I would never lead with a message of face masks or lead with a message of, you know, we are cleaning up, but have it interweaved delicately, what's the word I'm looking for, subtly throughout, so that people do feel safe. Having said that, what would make me feel safer? A city where everyone's wearing face masks and everything's spotlessly clean, or the bright open countryside where it's rural scenes, I keep saying vineyards, but rural vineyards, you know, the great outdoors. That's going to make me feel way more safer and way more inclined to visit than, you know, a hotel maid wearing a mask or something like that.
Sounds like Moldova is a winner already.
It is.
Al, what do you think of, look at marketing? We first need to convince the visitor to consider the destination, and second, to actually buy. So there's a role for the destination to create demand, then the trade comes in and converts demands into sales and brings people in. So there's a role for the destination, a role for the trade itself. Do you think, when you make these investments, how much should the destination make an investment through its tourism board? In the case of Moldova, maybe there isn't a dominant tourism board, but the trade is quite active. How much is it okay if the trade leads, or do you have to have government leading with promotional campaigns? Is there a magic solution?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal situation, it's both on a parallel path. Once the branding is established and says, okay, this is how we're going to present the destination to this market, because it's so important to identify the market, because then way the trade can work towards that. Then we have to make sure that the product delivery is what we say it will be. The worst thing we've seen tourist boards do is go out and market to a specific audience without the product ready to be delivered. And if it's not delivered, it's going to show up at TripAdvisor and not be positive. So we want to make sure that what that promise and what that delivery are consistent. So I think it's important for the government to help, in supporting, firstly, to make sure all the product is what we would call export ready. So they understand that what the discounts are, what the commissions are, what the expectations are for the people. Once you know that's in place, then the marketing. And initially, it's so important for the government to be out there doing that initial marketing and branding. To your question to Justin about, is it a good time to advertise? We think it's a great time to communicate. It might not be a campaign with a price, but it is a good time to tell the story. And for an emerging destination like Moldova, it's a great opportunity to show the wide open spaces like you were saying. We're big believers in, it's great to show all the staff with masks, because that means they've gone through all the protocol. I saw something the other day about theatrical cleaning, that hotels that used to clean at night are now also cleaning during the day, so everybody sees that and has that comfort level. One of my favorite expressions now is, safety is the new luxury. So when you see that, when you see people with masks taking two people out to a winery, and in the vineyard sitting one-on-one having a dinner without mask, then you've achieved all the things that you want to do. That there's still an intimacy, there's still a luxury, and there's still an open space that you can do it and feel comfortable at it. So it is working those things all together.
Thank you. Well, knowing Moldova firsthand and what all of you said, I would say I'm really excited about Moldova. I think it's a winner. It's one of the most exciting destinations, up and coming destinations that could really be a global success story. And truly, Moldova has all it takes, all of the ingredients for a phenomenal success. I want to turn it over to Christina, send the mic back to Christina. But before I do that, maybe a round of final recommendations or thoughts from all of you. We'll start with Justin. Justin, you appear on my far right, so we'll begin with you. I'm not sure how you appear to others, but take it away.
Final thoughts would be, let's continue the dialogue. Let's do some audits on the tourism industry as a whole at the minute within Moldova. What's performing well, what's not. I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm not biased towards TripAdvisor. I am, but let's see how many of the properties and how many of the attractions are already on TripAdvisor. How many of the owners have claimed those properties so they can start engaging in the dialogue. And then again, as Adam was saying as well, let's see which countries are going to be more susceptible first to opening up and traveling. And that's simply like the government just releasing, opening up their borders for people coming back into the country, so they don't have to quarantine for 2 weeks, because that's what's going to be the initial stuff. But research, data, conversations, and keeping the dialogue going is what would be my firm recommendations.
Thank you. Adam?
I think, my main closing thought would be the importance of cooperation at all levels. So that would include particularly cooperation between the private sector and the public sector. For a destination like Moldova, being able to work together in terms of strategy and branding, and even the tactics that you take in terms of marketing will be significant. Even a destination like the US, one of the big successes in the US over the last 7 years has been Brand USA, which is a public and private partnership. Brand USA is half funded by the private sector, but even more importantly, all of the marketing programs and campaigns are in partnership with the industry itself. Destination marketing doesn't happen independently of the industry. It's in concert with the industry. So I think especially as you begin to rebuild and look at which markets you're going to target at and what are the right messages, doing that together with one voice, pushing in the same exact direction, will make all the difference in the world.
Thank you. Al?
I think Moldova's in a great situation in the sense that it's the opportunity to build the tourism how they want to. And I think for a destination like that, it talks about quality more than quantity. One of the things we've seen a lot of destinations do is not focus on arrival numbers, but focus on spend numbers. And it's a better return when we talk about sustainability and long-term growth. It's not, can I get 20% more numbers in or 30% more numbers? It's better to say, can we get the highest spending people here? Can we get people staying for 9 days or 10 days instead of 4? And there's a lot of other ways to look at how you grow. I agree with Adam and Justin about the private and public partnership. Everybody being on the same page, because there's a limited amount of funds to be able to market. The more that everybody can be on that same page, the more effective you are in your marketing, especially in a global. And I will put a plug out to the US, since obviously there's a lot of interest. A place like Moldova is primed for a high-level, intrepid traveler who will spend money, understand the product, and come back and share that.
Thank you so much, Al. My final point, Christina, is kind of a summation of what we've heard, talking about the target being revenue as opposed to numbers, because that maintains respect for the destination, maintains the sustainability of the destination, and keeps it pristine and attractive. And that needs to be translated, however, into looking at the entire visitor journey, from arrival to departure and everything in between, how you enhance the quality, how you present that quality product in order to derive the largest amount of spend per visitor. So with this, I will turn it over to you, Christina.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for the wonderful I forgot leading this panel. Thank you, gentlemen, for your amazing presentations. I'm really optimistic, and we do believe that our country is going to have much better outcome that we have thought in the beginning of the outbreak. So once again, I would like to close this fantastic panel today, and I really believe that we're going to have much to do after this. Myself, I already have a few ideas, and probably we're going to hear each other soon. But closing in a slightly funny way, if you're going to allow me. Justin, we have an anonymous attendee asking for your contact details. And it's like on Facebook, you know, when people write you. So,
Am I getting a friend request?
But I'm going to recommend to our attendee to find you on LinkedIn, probably.
On LinkedIn, or by all means, if they want to send their details in to Ina or someone, very happy to do it that way. I don't really want to give out my address to all attendees right now, but
we have 8,000 of them.
It's not hard to find me.
Yes. Once again, I would like to thank you. There is one positive thing about the outbreak, that if we would have done this seminar forum live, probably we wouldn't have been able to have you all in the same room. So once again, thank you for the presentations. Ibrahim, thank you for the wonderful questions you have put to our panelists. And well, let's hope we're going to see you in Moldova. Please be our guests, visit us, try again our new wines. Of course, you've tried some of them. So I really hope to meet you all in live and see you again.
Thank you, and I love that you used your hashtag, be our guest. That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
That's right.